Those are your headlines this hour. CNN Presents New Orleans Rising continues right now.
And you press play.
We sit down with Audrey and Meldon Woods in the house they rebuilt to show them footage of Pontchartrain Park after the Katrina flooding. They were joined by their children and grandchildren.
It went that high up.
Oh, my God. See, Mel? I didn't dream it was that high.
They are stunned by what they see.
Wow. Wow. That's our house.
For the very first time, they're seeing their own house underwater.
Oh, God.
Wow.
You know, you knew it was high, but we never actually saw it. And to see it, I had no idea. Just knowing. Just knowing how bad it was.
It never goes away. I think about how close we came to losing our parents.
I don't see how we're sitting here. I don't see how we're sitting in the same house.
That's our house. Every child of yours is literally sobbing, and me too, and your grandchildren.
Right.
And you're not crying?
No.
Why not?
Because we made it.
Within a year, 74-year-old Audrey and 81-year-old Meldon were gutting their house.
They had on these white suits with white masks and
Your parents are in their 70s.
Yes, at this point. And they're hauling out pieces of sheetrock. My father with a cane carrying a piece of sheetrock out. And I remember calling Rita and saying, do you know what your parents are doing? They're gutting the house by themselves. I was like, okay, we can't anymore. Let's just go ahead on, find someone to gut it.
Our loan closing statement.
A record of the Woods' initial down payment, $465, was one of the few things in the house to survive the flooding. But when it came time to rebuild and refurnish their home, the projected price tag was staggering, over $300,000. The Woods were forced to take out a loan for more than $120,000.
And it's still tough, wondering how I'm going to repay that loan, because I know that I won't in my lifetime.
It's a common tale in New Orleans.
It's damnable and criminal. There are people who pay premiums for decades, like my parents, were giving no relief in their darkest hour. I mean, that's what insurance is all about, that in your time of need, you will be made whole, and we weren't made whole.
By 2006, still only a third of the residents had found their way back. This compared to middle-class white neighborhoods, where the return rates were at least twice that.
You called it a chocolate city. Some people took great umbrage at that.
I felt that African Americans in this city were getting signals that they weren't welcome back, and I wanted to try and overcome that.
Call it a chocolate city. Black people know what that means.
Oh, they knew. They got the message.
Even so, Ray Nagin, who was mayor of New Orleans when Katrina hit, says that in its aftermath, there was talk of changing the face of the city.
Do you think there were people literally who were trying to keep black people out of the city?
I think that people were looking at economics, and I think they were looking at a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to kind of recast New Orleans differently. And some openly said, you know, we don't want poor black people back, but I think that message was also bleeding over into our black middle class.
In January 2006, the Times-Picayune printed this map on its front page. It was a plan for redeveloping the city, putting parks in areas that before Katrina were largely residential.
When they started talking about all of the areas that were going to be green space, those were all of your black neighborhoods.
Wasn't your house?
Our house.
Nothing like seeing a green dot over your
Right.
home.
And, you know, nobody asked us anything.
After the uproar over green dots, the city eventually released its current recovery plan. Troy Henry had worked on earlier plans.
They decided to create 17 recovery zones, and Pontchartrain Park didn't make the list of the 17. So literally, we in the community was viewing it as we're left out.
That the areas deemed recovery zones, covered predominantly white neighborhoods, caught the attention of California Congresswoman Maxine and the Congressional Black Caucus.
If you don't put any money into rebuilding, you don't have the people to return, you don't have time to rehab these houses, then they will just sit here.
You would think that a neighborhood like Pontchartrain Park, with the history that it has of a determined people, would be honored by trying to preserve it, but it was not.
Why does it always come down to race? I mean, maybe it's just economics, maybe it's just the elderly population here.
You'd like to say, no, that's not what it is. Let's try and see this through a different lens. And unfortunately, it comes back too often in so many ways.
Herbie Oubre points to bureaucratic red tape as a major stumbling block. 2 years after the flooding, the mail carrier was still unable to tear down his ravaged home so he could start to build a new one. Back in 2007, he vented his frustration on the local news.
They told me that they had a stop demolish order on it because this area had been deemed a historic area. So I said, well, nobody informed me of this.
It didn't help that Herbie, now back working in Pontchartrain Park, was in perpetual transit. He and his family were still camped 70 miles away with relatives.
The hose needs to go out.
With the city, the road home, insurance companies, traveling back and forth from Baton Rouge, and traffic every day, it's stressful.
And my reaction was to work. I'm here, I'm working, because this is where Jacques needs to be. I need to support him here.
Did you ever fight over the return or not to return?
We fought terribly. Sometimes he would just get so aggravated that he would just get in his car and leave. I'm going back to New Orleans. I'm done. I'd say, oh, go. And then I'd go to the window. Oh, my God, he's gone.
Even as Herbie's marriage struggled, he stood by Wendell. And in November 2008, finally welcome news. The city of New Orleans signed a deal with the Pontchartrain Park Development Corporation. Accidental developer Wendell Pierce had earned his wings.
We were part of a bidding process, let me say.
Wendell aspired to deliver on a grand scale, 400 new homes.
If you go around this city, they have one and twosies, we call them, all over. God bless them. I'm trying to rebuild a neighborhood, man.
But by early 2010, more than a year after the deal was signed, the state had turned over only 4 plots of land.
Keep your spirits up. Try to keep them up.
I will. Then, some welcome news.
We got it, baby. Go!